Thank you for tuning in to part 4 of Arrival for this composition study. Looking forward to going through these last 8 frames, and we're going to get right into it here with frame number 25. So we're going to take a look at 1 hour 34, and this is a perfect frame right here. So with this frame, I'm really noticing how the phi grid is being used for really great close-ups. And if I turn this on here, let's go ahead and put this onto the phi grid. You see how this intersection, and actually let me actually put this at 0.5 for the opacity. You can see how at this intersection, her eye here just kind of floats around in this area here. And the difference, if I was to actually use the rule of thirds in this case, it would require that I pull this shot out a little bit wider, and I would have to use a wider focal length. So I do like the fact that I can use a punched in focal length with the phi grid in lieu of, if I was to use the rule of thirds, her eye would be floating in this direction. If I wanted to maintain the same sort of framing with her face, I'd have to pull out, and I would end up getting more of the background. It'd be a wider focal length that would be required. And then likewise, just a few frames later, if I go ahead and hit play on this, you're going to notice that the phi grid is again being used, for her daughter here. Again, same idea. Her eye line is floating on this top line here as a part of the phi grid here. And similarly, if we're using, again, the rule of thirds, and she was going to have her eye line somewhere around here, again, slightly wider focal length. If we're going to have the same sort of framing, again, I really enjoy how intimate you can be with this positioning with the phi grid. And there may be something to the positioning of the eye at this intersection here. And then if we go just a few frames back to Luis's character, where her eye is also being positioned on the opposite side of that phi grid as well. It seems to set up a sight line that kind of feels natural when cutting to the next shot here. So if I let that play out and we come back to her daughter's character here, it seems to feel natural in terms of the sight line. I don't really know how much science I can attribute to that, but I can tell you that it does feel natural and it does feel good. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next frame. We'll turn this overlay off, and we're going to slide over to 1 hour, 40 minutes and 41 seconds here. So let's go to 140. So with this frame, yet again, the character's face is bound by dynamic symmetry triangles and is facing the closest side of the frame to kind of maintain that tension and mystery. Again, that leading space is much shorter than that trailing space. And if I go ahead and I turn on this select dynamic symmetry here, I turn this on here, let's put the opacity at 0.5. You could see how Bradford Young is bounding the character's face, their eyes, their nose, and their mouth, creating this really interesting positioning within this portion of the frame. Now, this character is the president of China, I believe, and they're getting ready to whisper something into Luis's ear that's supposed to change everything. So it really leans into the tension and mystery of what's happening at this point in the movie. And I also just wanted to point out this sort of overtly warm lighting, which is really consistent with similar indoor shots throughout the entire film, especially with this type of framing where the character is leaning in to the side of the frame that's closest to them, again, invoking some tension and mystery for what's going on. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next shot. Let's turn this overlay off here, and now we're going to go to, we're just about there. Right about here. I think we're actually going to just start it right from here. And I think what was really interesting about this shot, I'm going to go ahead and turn on dynamic symmetry here. Let's put this at 0.5 here. I'm just going to let this entire shot play out. And again, what was really interesting is as this shot resolves from start to finish is there is dynamic symmetry among the placements of the various screens. Although it's a bit chaotic, there's this consistent report from all the news outlets that's being reported. So even though it's a bit chaotic in terms of how the screens are being laid out and stacked on top of one another, there's also a sense of harmony to what's might be considered a very overwhelming type of scene here. And I just thought that was just very sort of interesting how these were all laid out and apparently utilizing some sort of dynamic symmetry, kind of following these diagonals and these triangles for the placement of all of these different news outlet screens. Let's move on to the next shot. Let's go ahead and turn this off here. And we are now going to 1 hour, 44 minutes and 27 seconds here. So let's go ahead and slide to 1 hour, 44, 27 here. Now this shot to me clearly uses a spiral for the placement of shot elements. They have the curvature of this heptapod here, which blends really well with the curvature of the landscape here. And if we go ahead and put this on here, just from the spiral on, and if I just actually flip this upside down here, let's mirror this. I actually just want to go 180 degrees here and then mirror this. You can see how the spiral starts where the heptapod is, follows this curvature of the heptapod, and then even it looks like the foreground, the midground, and the background seem like there may have been some intentionality in terms of this curvature of the midground meeting this curvature of the foreground to create this really overall interesting shape here. Let's put this at 0.5 just to see that a little bit more clearly. It really is just an interesting and engaging shot. Let's take a look at the next shot. So it's just about there. Let's go ahead and hit play here. And here's the frame. So if I hit pause right there, you can see how the spiral is in full effect in this shot. The heptapod vessel being the focus of attention and the sun as a lighting source, which also lands on the spiral here as well. To me, this shot communicates scale. As we know, the heptapod vessels can be as tall as a city skyscraper. And I feel like the shot just really gives attention and focus to that. So let's go ahead and turn this off and get ready to look at the next frame here. Slide this. This is perfect right here. Now, I really love the symmetrical and monochromatic silhouetted frame. There's an incredible sense of depth that's communicated with the foreground, essentially with Luis and the elements that are in the room, the midground, which is the water, and the background, which is the hilltop range in the back here. There are a lot of like vertical elements here, like alongside the curtain here, the framing around the door, the trees. It feels very balanced and symmetrical. If I go ahead and turn on the quadrant here, let's turn that on. Put this at 0.5 here. You can just see how everything lands perfectly on this center line here. It's just a very well balanced frame with deep space all the way to the hilltop range. And it just feels really good. It feels really good. And then I also felt like this frame could also be represented with a spiral as well. If I was to turn the spiral on here, you can kind of see how Luis's character silhouetted here kind of is the focus in this frame. You're trying to see exactly what it is that she's doing. And then it just kind of opens up to the rest of the frame here, where it's just this sort of balanced open space here. Again, the focus really is on Luis and what she's doing in this frame here. Let's move on to the last frame. Let's go ahead and turn this off here. And we're going to go to 1 hour, 46:06. And with this shot, this just looks like another use of the spiral here. If I go ahead and turn this on, let's mirror the spiral. Let's go 0 here. Let me mirror this again, actually. Let's change the opacity here to 0.5. Now, this is just another use of the spiral. Starts with the helicopter, and it kind of opens up to this sort of twilight sort of landscape here. Again, just a nice shot, highlights the landscape, and gives focus to the helicopter that's in the front here. So that's it for this composition study on this movie Arrival. I've hoped that you've enjoyed diving into an analysis of these frames that were selected. There are many other shots within this film that are worth doing a deep dive into to understand what Denis Villeneuve and Bradford Young were trying to communicate. I hope that this has been helpful and educational for you as much as it has been for me. Once again, if you're interested in doing your own sort of compositional analysis, Please take a look at my plugins available on both fab.com as well as gumroad.com. I have some more movie analyses that I'm working on for you in the very, very near future. Please stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.